Ignoring local warnings, a young trekker set off into the unforgiving Himalayan wilderness, unaware of the ordeal that awaited him. What was meant to be a short adventure turned into a 43-day battle for survival. Stranded, starving, and alone, his story became one of the most incredible tales of endurance ever recorded. In December 1991, James Scott, a young Australian medical student, embarked on what was meant to be a week-long trek through the Himalayas. But when the days passed with no trace of him, his disappearance triggered one of the most harrowing and drawn-out survival ordeals the region had ever seen. This is his story, a tale of resilience, hope, and an unbreakable will to survive. In September 1990, James Scott, a 22-year-old medical student from Brisbane, Australia, sat down to write a letter. His request was simple. He wanted to complete his medical elective in Nepal, a country he believed was the perfect place to make a meaningful difference and help those in need. Nepal, one of the least developed nations at the time, was a world apart from the comforts of home, and for James, that was exactly the point. He wanted to make a real difference. Weeks passed, then months, with no response to his request. But James wasn't one to give up easily. A year later, he held a plane ticket to Kathmandu in hand and had persuaded his best friend, Tim Hooper, to join him just before their departure. A letter finally arrived, a resounding yes from a Kathmandu hospital. James was overjoyed. Everything was falling into place. He was excelling in medical school, had a fiancée waiting for him back home, and now an adventure in the Himalayas. Awaited James wasn't a thrill-seeker, but he was fiercely disciplined. A black belt in karate. He had competed nationally and won championships. He was fit, strong, and confident in his ability to handle challenges, but the Himalayas would test him in ways he never imagined. James and Tim arrived in Nepal in September 1991, 2 months before James' medical elective was set to begin. Eager to explore, they planned a trek along the Himalayan Trail, a popular route through forests, rocky landscapes, and some of the deepest gorges in the world. They hired porters and a guide, packed meticulously, and set off. The trek was a success. The weather was mild, the views are breathtaking, and the challenges manageable. So manageable, in fact, that they sent their guide and porters back early, continuing on their own with minimal gear. When they returned to Kathmandu, they were riding high and immediately began planning a second trek for December. This time, they chose the Himalayan Trail, a more challenging route with lodges along the way, but December in the Himalayas was a different beast altogether, unprepared for the harsh winter conditions. They packed light, a few changes of clothes, a light jacket, and some books for the evenings. It was a decision that would nearly cost James his life on December 21st, 1991. James and Tim set out on the Himalayan Trail. Along the way, they met a group of German trekkers who warned them the trail wasn't worth the effort. Disappointed, James pulled out an old, outdated map and spotted an alternative route. The Germans couldn't trail the Germans. Noticing his outdated map generously gave him a newer one. The next day, Tim suffered a leg injury and had to turn back. James was torn between staying with his friend and continuing the trek. I was convinced by Tim to go on with Mark Fulton, an Australian solo trekker. They had met. In a moment of distraction, James accidentally gave Tim the new map and kept the outdated one. It was a small mistake with enormous consequences. James and Mark continued on the ghost and trail, but the weather turned against them. A light dusting of snow overnight gave way to a full-blown storm. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the trail disappeared beneath the snow. James, terrified, suggested turning back, but Mark was confident he could find the way. Reluctantly, they split up, Mark pressing forward. James retraced his steps, but the snow was relentless. James soon found himself lost following a creek that he hoped would lead to safety. Instead, it led him to a dead end, a 100-foot waterfall with no way down and no clear path back. James faced an impossible choice. He decided to climb the rock wall beside the waterfall, a feat that took him 2 grueling hours. Exhausted, he collapsed under a rocky overhang where he would spend the next 43 days fighting for his life. James's survival instincts kicked in. He dried his clothes, rationed his 2 chocolate bars, and melted snow for water. But as the days turned into weeks, his situation grew dire. His feet turned blue from frostbite, and he developed mouth ulcers and a throat infection. Hunger gnawed at him constantly, but he clung to the discipline he had learned through karate, using meditation-like techniques to keep his mind focused. One day, he awoke to the sound of a Himalayan black bear nearby, armed only with a pair of dissection scissors. He shouted at the bear, hoping it would end his suffering. Instead, the bear fled, leaving James to endure the cold and isolation. Back in Kathmandu, Tim raised the alarm. When James failed to return, James's sister, Joanne, flew to Nepal to join the search. Rescue teams scoured the mountains, but the harsh terrain and weather made the mission nearly impossible. Desperate Joanne consulted a Buddhist who pointed to a specific point on the map, a triangle formed by the towns where hopeful rescuers focused their efforts. Meanwhile, Mark Fulton, who had made it out of the mountains, confirmed that he and James had separated near Fiji. This revelation aligned with the Lama's prediction, giving the search team a renewed sense of purpose. On day 43, James heard the sound of a helicopter. Weak and emaciated, he stumbled into a clearing, frantically waving his sleeping bag and red long johns at a helicopter flying overhead. But it passed by, leaving James devastated. Hours later, he heard voices, real ones this time. Rescuers Carl Harrison and his team had finally found him. When they reached James, they were stunned. "You are a god," one rescuer said in disbelief. "No one survives here more than 10 days. James had survived 43. James was airlifted to Kathmandu, where Joanne waited with bated breath. When the helicopter touched down, she could hardly recognize her brother, bearded, frail, and a shadow of the man she knew. But he was alive. James was taken to the hospital and in time made a full recovery. Yet the ordeal left behind lasting scars, both physical and emotional. James's survival is a powerful testament to human resilience and the enduring strength of hope. His journey, marked by preparation, chance, and sheer determination, remains one of the most extraordinary survival stories in the Himalayas. In a twist that defies explanation, his earlier prediction about where he would be found turned out to be hauntingly accurate. I'm really keen to know your thoughts on this story, so please don't hesitate to share your insights in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and found it engaging, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more similar content. Feel free to share this video. Take good care of yourselves, and I'm excited to connect with you in our future videos.